Hello and welcome to part 1 of HTML Basics. I'm Jeff LaBeouf, and in this first video we'll be discussing HTML and what it's used for. HTML is the core language on the web, and it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So HTML is a markup language, which means it's used to describe content. If we have information we want to present on a web page, we can use HTML to describe the content for the web browser so that it's rendered appropriately. An HTML file is just a text file with an HTML extension. In my folder here I've created inside my web server, I can create a new text file and change its name to make it an HTML file. I'm going to call it index.html. When I do that, I can see that the icon changes and the type. So now my computer recognizes this as an HTML file. If I double click it, it's going to open it with Internet Explorer. So I want to edit this, and I will choose Open With. I'm going to select Notepad for this tutorial. In later videos, we'll be using Dreamweaver. Okay, here we have Notepad. This is my first HTML file. Hello world. Capitalize F. Okay, just going to save this. And now I'm going to double click my file. Okay, so the file opened up in Internet Explorer, and we can see our text, or our content. My first HTML file, Hello World. Now you might be wondering why this is all on one line, when in Notepad I clearly put this on 2 lines. Okay, so HTML is space insensitive, which means we can put extra spaces, returns, and tabs, and the web browser will always just read that as one space, which is what we see here. Now, for this to work a little bit better, we need to use HTML. We need to mark it up. So if we mark it up, we can describe what this text actually is, and the web browser should render it differently. So this is my heading. So I'm going to use a tag called h1. Here we go. And this is the body of my page. So I'm going to use the p tag for paragraph. I just need to save this, and I can refresh my page, and now it renders a lot better. So now I can see my heading, and I can see the body text, and they show up differently, which gives the user a better understanding of the structure of my file. So let's talk about HTML a little bit. You might have noticed that when I wrote my tag, I put a less than sign and a greater than sign, and then a code in the middle. Now this code is called an element, and the HTML standard has a variety of elements for different purposes. So when you create an HTML page, it's important that you have some kind of a resource to reference those elements so that you use the best one or the most appropriate element for your content. So in this simple example, I just have a heading in paragraph type. So this is all I need. Now what's this over here, you might ask? I created an h1 tag on the left side of my content, but then on the right side of my content I mirrored it, but I put a slash in there. So most tags in HTML have content inside of them. So my first HTML file is the content that I want displayed, and I want it rendered as an h1, or a top level heading. So I have to put my h1 tag on both sides of it. This is called, the left is called a start tag, because that starts the HTML, it starts the rendering the content as h1. On the right hand side, the slash changes the meaning a little. What this is an end tag. So this ends the point at which my content is h1. Excuse me. Same thing down here with the p tag. And this is consistent with almost all HTML tags. If it's a two-sided element, it's going to have a start tag and an end tag. There's another type of element which is called an empty tag. And this is an element that doesn't have any content inside. A good example of that is IMG. IMG is a picture, so an image. If I have an image that I want to display on my page, I would use the IMG tag. Now the problem is, we have a couple of problems. First, the IMG tag doesn't have any content. I can't do this because there's nothing to put in the middle. This is a text file, so I can put text here, but I can't place an image. So that doesn't help us. What we have instead is the empty tag. So the empty tag doesn't have two sides to it. It just has one side, and we put the little closing slash on the right hand side. Okay. So we have our standard two-sided tags here and our empty tag. So this tag has content, this tag does not have content. Now let's test this and see what happens. Here we see our image icon. Of course, we haven't defined what image we want to display on screen, so we just get this generic icon. Okay. I do have an image that I want to display on screen. This is the little Apache logo here. And I can see its file type. It's a GIF, which is a good file to use. You can use GIFs, JPEGs, or PNGs for images on the web. I'm going to copy this. Alright, now I can define it. So IMG, that code is called the element, just like this is a P element and this is an H1 element. To define the file, or to sort of link my file to my page, I need to use what's called an attribute. So the attribute, the specific attribute I'm going to use is src. Okay. So this is how you would format the attribute for an image tag. So src is the attribute, and there's lots of attributes. Again, just like there are lots of elements, some attributes go inside a tag like IMG, which is an empty tag, and some attributes can go inside the P tag or the H1 tag. So there's lots of variety between elements and attributes, which makes HTML a very rich language. So this, again, will work. We have src equals, and then in quotes we have our value. So if this is the attribute, this is the value. Okay? And we always surround our values in quotes. And the syntax is equals. This can get a little confusing when we start getting into CSS, because CSS does use a different syntax. Let's save this and preview it. Now we get a new image which you might be familiar with, which is the broken link or the broken image icon. So we've used the attribute correctly, but we did not place an accurate value in here. And that's not our file name. This is our file name. There we go, and now we see our image. One last thing. If you notice in my URL, it says c:/examp htdocs sandbox index.html. It says all that because when I previewed my file, I simply double-clicked it. Well, that means that I opened it locally on my machine. But it is on my web server, so I can actually type in my URL. And my URL is localhost/sandbox. Now, I didn't have index.html typed anywhere in there. And you probably, if you think about it, you probably don't typically type in index.html when you load a home page. For example, if you go to Google, you type in google.com. Not many of us are typing google.com/index.html. That's because most web servers will automatically seek out a file called index and serve it up as the home page. So if you have a web server with lots of HTML files in its folder, like I'm sure you will if you are developing HTML, your web server will need some kind of a convention for choosing the sort of the start page or the home page. And most web servers are pre-configured to select the index file or index.html. Now you can change that if you have access to your server and want to customize it, but for the most part that's a very common standard. Okay. Well, that just about covers our discussion about HTML and just pure basics of it. In our next video, we'll discuss the proper structure for an HTML page and get into a little bit more detail with different tags. Thanks for watching.